Alright guys, what's going on? I got some parts in for the YZ250F, so let's see what's going on over there, see what I got on the bench. So I just went ahead and got the wrench rabbit kit. I was ordering all the seals, all the gaskets, everything like that, O-rings, new crank, new piston, all that stuff, and I was starting to get within like 50 bucks of just buying the whole kit, so I just went ahead and bought the whole kit. Got the case halves on the bench here. They're ready to go pretty much to be cleaned. It's just I got to knock these bearings out, but first I got to take all these retainers out, and they're, as you can see, they're staked. So I think what I'm going to do is just put the impact in there and just tear it out, just like you'd rip off a band-aid, nice and quick. See how that works. So they actually came out really good, so all I'm going to do now is just pull this seal out and start hitting these bearings out. These two here, I think this one and this one I'm going to have to use the blind bearing puller, but these ones here I should be able to hit out from the other side here. So I got the bearings out now. This one was a little bit of a headache, but some heat did the trick there and it let the bearing go. I'll put this in the vise after it's cooled down a little bit, and I'll show you how I get the like a brushed aluminum look on this. I wish I had access to a vapor blaster, but I don't, so this is the next best thing to getting the cases looking new and shiny. So to get the brushed aluminum look on these case halves here, I just use my Dremel tool, and I got these little Scotch-Brite wheels. It might take a little longer than a bench grinder, but I don't have one, so these do really well, and it looks really good after it's done. So I got one case half done, and as you can see, these little wheels here make a huge difference on the case there. It looks really nice compared to that one. So I'll link these down below where I got them in the description. And I also went over them with a little bit bigger of a Scotch-Brite pad, and I just scrubbed it a little bit just to get the nice brushed look going. So what I'm going to do now is I actually have an oven over here that I'm starting to do a little bit of powder coating with. So I'm going to put this on a sheet. I'm going to put this in the oven at about 350 degrees. And then when it reaches 350 degrees, I'll take it out, put it on the bench here, and the bearings should fall right in for me. So I'll make a little edit here about putting the bearings in. When I took them out, I laid all the bearings on the bench the way they need to go into the case, because you'll see they have little covers on them like this. So these bearings need to go face down into the case like I've done here. And don't put the main bearing in like this, because then your retainer locks won't work. So the reason why it has that little machine out there is to fit the retainer locks. So just like that, you've seen all the bearings go in nice and easy. So I definitely recommend, if you are going to do this job and you do have 220 in your garage, I definitely recommend getting an oven. You can pick these up relatively cheap on Facebook or something like that. A lot of people are giving them away simply because they're really old and they don't want them anymore. So if you do have a 220 outlet, again, grab one. So I'm going to let this cool down, and then when it's about room temperature, so I'm going to start putting all the retainers back in. All right, guys, I got all the retainers back in there now. So I Loctited them and I re-staked them there. I tightened them a little bit past their original stake, and I kind of made my own there. So definitely not going to go anywhere. So I'm going to call this case half done. So I'm going to move on to the other one here now. And I'm probably just going to time-lapse that whole thing because it's all pretty much the same. The only thing different is you just got to watch like this dowel here and a little O-ring. And you got the oil pump pickup screen right here. That's about the only difference. And also on this right hand case where the cylinder bolts on, there's a O-ring here and an O-ring there, and there's little dowels in there too, so you gotta watch those. Well, it's the next day and I got the right hand case out on the bench here. So the next step after all the bearings are done and in is putting the crank in there. So what I'm going to do is I've got the crank in the deep freeze, and I'm going to hit this with a heat gun for a little bit and warm up that bearing just so it slides in nice and easy for me. So that dropped in absolutely perfectly. So now it's in there and ready to make some power. So I also replaced, there's a little O-ring right here. I replaced that on the dowel. And make sure the bolts for your pickup screen are tight. Everything's tight. And the next two things to go in are the main shaft and the counter shaft. So I've got the gears in, everything's spinning okay here. When you put the gear set in initially and the gear forks, the shift forks, don't get discouraged if your gears bind up. So you have to have the whole assembly in. So you got to put your shift drum, forks, everything in. Then it'll spin like this. And one way to check if everything's working okay is you kind of shift it up if you can. So that might be first gear. And if you can turn it at all, sometimes you can find neutral right there. So you hold that and everything spins independently. So that usually means your shift drum's in. Sometimes you might have to, when you put the other case on, you might have to go back and finagle it a little bit or whatever. But something else to watch for is there's another O-ring right here. So you want to replace that so you don't have oil leaking out. So now I'm going to be using some silicone gasket maker. It's just this Loctite. You can find it pretty much anywhere. These don't come with a gasket, so you got to get something like this. I'm sure Yamaha recommends something, but I'm just going to use this stuff. It works really well. So you want to make sure you clean your surface up really good, and clean the other mating surface up too, and then just put silicone all the way around everything, and it should seal up nice for you. You also want to do a couple of test fits too, because when you put the dowels in, the dowels sometimes, I think if you put them in the wrong hole, it won't line up. So you want to make sure your dowels are lining up before you actually put the gasket maker on, and then have a big mess when you figure out you can't get the other side of the case on. So now that you got everything ready to go in now you just clean it off with a little bit of contact cleaner on both sides. Put your silicone down and then try and get your case half back on. I'm gonna try and do it with the puller installer this time. We'll see how this goes. I know it's a lot easier with the puller installer, but I don't have it here right now. There it is, guys. I got the case halves together here, so now I'm just gonna set this out of the way and let the silicone set up there and move on to something else. All right, well, we got the engine back on the bench here now, so now I'm gonna start by putting the oil pump in, and then I'll move on to do the shift linkage after that. Okay, so I got the shifting components in. So just to illustrate how to test if you've got your shifting mechanisms in properly, and how to shift it while you're trying to shift it while it's just on the bench. I put a vice grip on here. So right now it's in the neutral position, and you'll see it. There's a little cog with like a little V shape in it, and that's what the detent will sit in. So if you shift it into first, hold it up, she'll shift into first, and then see that shaft moves now. So then you go into second and keep turning the shaft. You got to keep working these shafts around because it won't shift if you don't. So if it doesn't just shift for you automatically, just don't be discouraged. You gotta mess with these a little bit. So then you'll go to third, and then fourth, and then finally fifth. So now to get back down, you just go the other way. You just go 5, 4. Like I said, you gotta sometimes mess with it a little bit, and your shifting linkage might come out because it's not bolted in. So then we got 3, 2, and then back into neutral. So you got to mess around on. I'm messing around with this on the other side to get everything to mesh in properly, because as those gears move, they got to be able to mesh in with each other. So if they don't just shift for you properly, without messing around on it, don't get discouraged. You always got to mess around with the counter shaft and the main shaft there. So now that I know it's shifting correctly, now I can move on and install all the rest of the gears and the counterbalance shaft and everything. So with these counterbalance gears, I'll show you how these are supposed to be timed here. That dot there, you can see that has to go on this right here. You can see that flattened spline. That dot has to line up with that. So I'll show you the assembly after. I'll just put it together. I'll time this all up correctly, and then I'll just show after how it's supposed to look. So that's how this is supposed to look when it's all installed correctly. This little dot here, and it's the same thing over here, which you can't see. I had to put the nut and the lock washer on just because it kept on falling out. But this gear is timed the same way. There will be a flat, zoom in here. There'll be a flat spline here, and that's what that dot, that mark needs to line up with. And same thing, it's hidden behind the scenes there, but same thing over there. And then when you get that all done, you need to line those two dots up to time it, because this weight here needs to counteract the up and down of the crank. I'm doing here is getting the right hand cover ready. So in this little piece here, you're gonna have a new seal with the spring that way. So it wants to seal the oil from coming this way. And then you'll have a washer and then a retainer clip. And this is where the water pump is. So right here is where the bearing will go. This is the oil seal. So you'll want the groove facing this way towards the oil, and the opposite way on the water side. So you want the groove facing the water side so it seals. You see where that spring is? So that'll seal the water from going in here or into the oil cavity. And that's the weep hole for the water pump seal. So if you've got coolant coming out of there or oil, you've got a leak in one of those seals. So this seal here is it actually keeps the check ball for the oil pump inside there. So there's a ball bearing inside here. So if you pull this seal out, there'll be a ball bearing in there, and that's just to check the oil from going the wrong direction in the oil pump. Okay, well, I'm going to call that bottom end done there now. There's definitely still the stator on the other side. These covers are just kind of loosely on here. I'm just putting it on here for just to see what it looks like. I'm unsure what I'm going to do with this cover. Let me know down in the comments what you think I should do with it, whether I should strip it and powder coat it, or just leave it as is, clean it up a bit, and maybe just brighten this up a little bit or something like that. I'm thinking of going with a rally blue on this part here, that color there, and I'm thinking about doing the water pump cover in black. So let me know what you think down in the comments. So that is going to be it for this video, guys. As you can see, I have a ton of cleanup to do. I have a ton of editing for the video left. I got the bottom end pretty well done there, so I'll continue on in the next video. If you want to see that, make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit the notifications bell if you want to see this bike go back together. And as always, thanks a lot for watching.